Some betrayals don't stab you in the back. They smile at you while twisting the knife. I'm Sophie. I'm 35. I worked in the marketing division of a global tech firm for nearly 7 years. I was never the loudest in the room, but I was always the one who delivered quietly, precisely, and on time. I wasn't interested in office drama. I didn't care for politics. All I wanted was to be recognized when I earned it. But people like Rachel, they thrive in noise. Rachel joined as a rising star, full of buzzwords and bold lipstick and an attitude that turned every meeting into her personal TED Talk. At first, I didn't mind. I watched her move up too quickly while I stayed in the same role for 2 years longer than I should have. Still, I did the work. I let my performance speak. Until the day my name was finally on the shortlist for promotion. And that's when everything changed. It wasn't just a hope, it was math. I had led the campaign that broke regional records. I handled 2 crises without escalating to upper management. My team respected me, my clients trusted me, and for the first time my manager had openly said, "It's your time." That sentence stayed with me. I worked late for 2 straight weeks building the quarterly pitch deck, fine-tuning data points, preparing our division's roadmap for the entire year. The presentation had my fingerprints all over it, graphs I built, slogans I crafted, strategy I designed. The day before our department review, I left my file on the shared drive, labeled clearly for the leadership team. And then I went home, proud, tired, hopeful. But the next morning, the mood had shifted. People were congratulating Rachel. "Your presentation was brilliant. Your vision for Q4 is genius." My stomach dropped. My slides, my phrasing, my roadmap. She had presented my work as hers. And worse, she did it so casually, so confidently, like she'd been the one sweating over it for nights on end. I didn't storm into her office. I didn't yell. I didn't even confront her. Instead, I went to the bathroom, locked the farthest stall, and stared at the tiled wall in silence for 12 minutes straight. My hand shook not from weakness, but from restraint. From knowing this wasn't just personal, it was calculated. Rachel didn't accidentally use my presentation. She replaced the cover page, renamed the file, and erased the metadata that would have proven it was mine. But she forgot one thing: email timestamps. I had sent that file to my direct manager 36 hours earlier. I still had the backup drafts. I still had Slack messages from my team giving feedback on slides. I still had the autosaves with my user. I de-embedded in every layer. I didn't need revenge. I needed precision. I started compiling everything: screenshots, metadata, version history. I set up a folder named Truth, and I didn't touch it for a week. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted her to believe she had won. A few days later, Rachel invited me to a quick sync. We weren't friends. We were never even friendly. So that alone was suspicious. In the meeting room, she smiled as if nothing had happened. She asked how I was doing. Then, casually, she said, "I know you've been feeling a little underappreciated lately. I just wanted to say I value your support." Support. That word sat heavy in my gut. "I hope there's no confusion about the Q4 strategy deck," she continued. "I mean, we all worked on it together, right?" I really looked at her, and realized she wasn't apologizing. She was managing me, neutralizing me, spinning a false memory before I had the chance to claim the truth. I smiled, and I nodded, because sometimes the smartest move is to let someone think they've manipulated you, while you quietly prepare the storm. That night, I called Hannah, our former team lead who had resigned 6 months ago, burnt out and bitter. I asked her a simple question: "Did Rachel ever take credit for your work?" Her pause said enough. Then she sighed and said, "I didn't have proof." She's slippery. But I did, and I wasn't alone. I reached out to 2 others who had quietly left or transferred out of our division. One had lost her promotion after a performance report Rachel submitted. Another had been sidelined in a project that Rachel later presented as her own initiative. I didn't gossip. I built a pattern. I took notes, collected testimonies, screenshotted Slack threads, linked timelines, and when my truth folder was full, I added one final file, an internal HR complaint, backed with evidence, labeled with dates, cross-referenced with 3 others. I didn't raise my voice. I raised the system against her. I submitted the report late at night when no one was online to notice. It wasn't just a complaint, it was a case file. It contained timestamps, team logs, side-by-side slide comparisons, and 3 corroborating statements. Every claim was supported. Every assumption backed. I didn't attach emotion. No language of revenge. Just facts. By morning, I received a cold, automated acknowledgement. We have received your internal report and will be reviewing it in accordance with company policy. That was fine. I didn't expect fireworks. But within 48 hours, something shifted. Rachel canceled 2 meetings. Our department head rescheduled our performance reviews. And HR requested a one-on-one with me to clarify certain project responsibilities. No one said anything out loud. But in the cafeteria, the usual buzz around Rachel was gone. Her laughter, once a staple, now sounded forced. You could feel the tension cling to her heels as she walked past. The thing about lies is that they need constant maintenance. And I just cut the power. My meeting with HR wasn't hostile, it was delicate. Like they were handling an exposed wire with gloves on, afraid to touch it too directly. The woman interviewing me, Lydia, had been with the company for years. She knew how to ask without asking. But I came prepared not just with files, but with poise. I showed her the timeline, how the slide deck evolved. I presented call logs, calendar invites, even a note from my team thanking me for the campaign outline a full week before Rachel's presentation. She didn't interrupt. She took notes, lots of them. Then she asked the one question I was waiting for. Why didn't you come forward earlier? I looked her straight in the eye, because I was still trying to believe it was a misunderstanding. And just like that, the room shifted. I wasn't just a complainer. I was someone who had been forced into silence, someone who waited too long to defend what she earned. I wasn't there to bring Rachel down. I was there to stand back up. Rachel must have felt it coming. People like her always do when the ground begins to tremble beneath the lies they've cemented. She stopped making eye contact in meetings. She triple-checked emails before sending them. She stopped calling herself the Q4 lead in front of directors. And then the inevitable, she tried to talk to me again. Cornered me in the hallway, somewhere between the break room and the exit door. Listen, she said. This whole thing is just a misunderstanding. We can sort it out. No need to drag everyone into it. There it was. The fear. The desperation. The realization that the story she crafted had holes only the truth could fill. I smiled politely. I agree, I said. Which is why I've left it to HR. She flinched. Just a flicker. And in that moment, I knew. She wasn't afraid I was lying. She was afraid I had proof. HR did something rare. They began calling in her past team members. Not just the current ones, but names from old rosters. People who had transferred out, quit, or been quietly managed out. One by one, people started talking. They shared familiar stories, files disappearing, credits misplaced. Initiatives quietly handed over during meetings where Rachel would speak on behalf of the group. And suddenly, my case wasn't a case. It was a pattern. A manager from 2 years ago forwarded an old exit email he had written but never sent. A junior analyst shared Slack messages where Rachel had taken credit for her metrics. Even Lydia from HR, once so neutral, began asking sharper questions in our follow-ups. I didn't have to twist anyone's arm. Rachel's past did the heavy lifting for me. It wasn't just my story anymore. It was a chorus of voices long overdue. Then came the email that made it all official. Formal ethics review. You are invited to attend a panel session regarding concerns raised within your department. It didn't have her name, but we both knew who it was for. I wasn't required to be there, but they gave me the option to attend as a witness. I said yes. The conference room was cold, clinical. 3 panel members, 1 HR lead, and Rachel flanked by legal counsel, now suddenly more quiet than ever. I spoke clearly, presented my case one last time. No anger, no drama, just evidence. When it was over, no one clapped. There were no raised voices, just silence. And sometimes silence is what real accountability sounds like. 2 days later, Rachel was placed on administrative leave. They didn't say it out loud, but everyone knew what it meant. Her badge access was revoked. Her Slack status vanished. The intern who used to carry her coffee now avoided saying her name. It was quiet, swift, corporate. I didn't dance. I didn't cheer. I just sat in my cubicle, watching an inbox once filled with tension slowly return to normal. Tasks were delegated fairly again. Credit was given properly. Meetings no longer felt like war zones. The silence she left behind wasn't empty, it was peaceful. And for the first time in years, I could breathe without looking over my shoulder. Sometimes justice doesn't come with a bang. Sometimes it's just the absence of fear. Rachel never reached out. No email, no message, no I'm sorry. And oddly enough, I didn't need it. She knew what she did. I had the receipts. So did HR. So did everyone who had once doubted their instincts about her. Her silence wasn't victory, it was confirmation. People like Rachel think apologies are currency. That if they throw one at you, they can buy back their image, their reputation, maybe even your forgiveness. But some debts can't be paid with words. They must be paid in accountability. And her silence? That was the only confession I ever needed. The company promoted me 3 months later. Not because they felt sorry, but because the metrics spoke for themselves and now there was no one left to interrupt the truth. My name was finally on the report covers. I led my first team meeting not as someone who supported a project, but as the one directing it. And when I saw my name on the office door, printed on a clean white plaque, I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I simply smiled, shut the door behind me, and opened my laptop like I had 1,000 times before. Only this time, the space belonged to me. Fully, deservedly, quiet power. That's what I had earned. Rachel tried to rewrite the story, of course. Through mutual friends, LinkedIn posts, even industry networking events. She was framed. It was office politics. She was a threat because she was successful. I didn't respond. I didn't defend myself. I didn't post or clarify or participate in her revisionist fantasy. Because when people know the truth, they don't need reminders. And those who still believed her, they were never on my side to begin with. Let her spin the tale however she likes. Meanwhile, I was too busy building a career out of integrity. This wasn't just about a stolen idea. It was about every time I stayed quiet to keep the peace. Every promotion passed over. Every compliment that turned into a dismissal. Every moment I made myself smaller so someone else could shine. That ended the day I hit send on that report. I didn't just get a title. I reclaimed my voice. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. You don't have to be the loudest in the room to change it. Sometimes all it takes is refusing to be erased. And that was the loudest thing I've ever done. The day after Rachel disappeared from the office, I walked past her old desk. It still had traces of her sticky notes clinging to the edge of the monitor, a half-empty perfume bottle, a coffee cup stained with pink lipstick long forgotten. It wasn't her I missed, but the space she had once occupied in my psyche, the anxiety, the tension, the cautious way I tiptoed around her moods. It hit me how much of my energy had been consumed managing her presence instead of nurturing my own potential. And yet, despite her absence, something lingered, a ghost of self-doubt, of all the times I second-guessed myself because her voice was louder, her stride more confident, her stories better received. Now, the space was mine to reclaim. But first, I had to unpack the weight she left behind, not in physical things, but in the small hesitation she planted in me over years of subtle sabotage. It's one thing to remove the enemy. It's another to remove the fear they installed inside you. It was during a quiet Sunday brunch when my sister asked, "Do you feel like you won?" She wasn't judging, she was genuinely curious. the way only someone who's seen you crumble and rebuild can be. I stared into my cup for a long moment, watching the steam rise like memories I didn't ask to relive. I don't think it was about winning, I finally said. It was about stopping the bleeding. Because that's what betrayal does, it bleeds you slowly, quietly. By the time you notice how pale you are, you've already lost too much of yourself. It wasn't about revenge or validation anymore. It was about survival and, eventually, rebirth. 3 months after my promotion, I was invited to speak at a women's leadership conference. My first instinct was to decline. I didn't like the spotlight. I didn't think I had anything important to say. But then I remembered how many rooms I had sat in, invisible. How many times I had wished someone had spoken out loud the things I silently endured. So I said yes. And on that stage, under soft white lights, I told my story not with rage or bitterness, but with calm, practiced truth. I didn't need names, I didn't need to. What I gave them was real, what power looks like when it's earned quietly, what injustice feels like when it's dressed as opportunity. And when I walked off stage, a woman stopped me with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "You said what I never dared to say." That was when I realized I wasn't just reclaiming my story. I was helping others reclaim theirs too. Funny how ghosts resurface when you stop being afraid of them. Michael, my ex-fiance, long before Rachel texted me after hearing about my conference speech. He had heard the whispers, the applause, the rising reputation I was slowly building. His message was short. "You're doing well." "I always knew you would." I stared at it, remembering the man who once told me I was too soft to lead, who had said, "Don't cause a scene," every time I pushed back. I didn't reply. Not because I was bitter, but because some echoes belong in the past, untouched. And Michael? He was just background noise in a life I no longer lived. On the anniversary of my promotion, the team surprised me with cake and a small gift, a framed print with bold, elegant lettering that read, "Do no harm, take no shit." It made me laugh harder than I had in months. But as I looked around the room at the people who respected me, supported me, and finally saw me, I realized I wasn't just celebrating a title. I was celebrating the woman who chose herself, who stood up, who refused to be silenced. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of something even bigger than justice. It was the beginning of becoming whole again. Late one night, I sat at my kitchen table with a blank page and an uncapped pen. The letter began easily. "Dear Rachel." I didn't write it with the intention of sending it. Maybe I just needed to exhale something I'd been holding in too long. I wrote about the first time I noticed her, how I had genuinely admired her confidence, how I had never seen her as a threat until she made herself one. I told her how it felt to be erased from a story I helped build, how it felt to smile through meetings while being gutted in secret. But then my words shifted. I thanked her. Not sarcastically. Not bitterly. I thanked her for forcing me to see who I had become, how much I had shrunk, how quiet I had gotten, how little I thought of my own worth. Without her, I may never have woken up. I never mailed that letter. I folded it in half, tucked it into a drawer, and went to bed. But writing it? That was a kind of closure I didn't know I needed. One afternoon, I caught our newest intern watching me closely during a team huddle. At first, I thought maybe I had something on my face, but then I realized she wasn't judging me. She nodded, wide-eyed, and whispered, "I hope I can be like that one day." I didn't say anything right away, but inside I thought you already are. I smiled, not because I had the answer, but because someone thought I did. I told her the truth. That calm isn't natural, it's practiced. That power doesn't always roar. That sometimes the strongest voice in the room is the one that waits, then speaks once, and makes everyone listen. She was studying me. After the meeting, she came up and said, "Can I ask, how do you stay so calm even when people interrupt you?" The biggest project of the year was underway, and for the first time, I wasn't just helping execute the vision, I was shaping it. I sat at the leadership table, pen in hand, voice steady. outlining strategies that would go global. A room once full of towering egos now looked to me not for decoration, but for direction. As I presented, I caught my reflection in the glass wall behind the others. I didn't look like the girl who once cried quietly in a locked bathroom stall. I looked like someone who had walked through fire and remembered to carry water for the next woman behind her. When I finished, no one spoke for a second. Then the room erupted in nods and affirmations. That silence before the applause? That was my arrival. My mother never really understood the corporate world. She worked in a local bakery for 35 years and taught me that success wasn't about money, it was about peace. When I finally told her the whole story, every betrayal, every plan, every burn, she looked at me quietly for a long time and then said, "It's strange, isn't it? How some people are only strong when someone else is small." That sentence stayed with me because Rachel, Michael, they had all grown taller by stepping on others. But now I had learned how to grow without shrinking anyone. And that my mother said is the kind of strength no one can take away from you. Months passed, promotions came, my reputation solidified. And Rachel? She never reached out. Not a message, not a word. And oddly, I was grateful. Because I didn't need her apology anymore. I used to think closure meant hearing, "I'm sorry" from the one who hurt you. But now I knew better. Closure is waking up one morning and realizing you no longer want their words, their regret, or even their acknowledgement. Closure is standing in your own story, unshaken, unashamed, and unbothered by their silence. It's no longer hoping they'll make it right, because you already did. One rainy Saturday, I was organizing old files when I came across a forgotten email folder labeled drafts. Most were scraps of unfinished messages or reminders to myself, but buried inside was one I had typed the night after Michael fired me. I had poured everything into it: rage, grief, disbelief. I had called him a coward, a traitor, a man too small to stand beside a woman who refused to kneel. I had never sent it. Reading it now, I didn't feel the need to. Not because I had forgiven him, but because I had outgrown the version of myself who needed to scream to be heard. Sometimes healing isn't about getting answers. It's about realizing you don't have any more questions. One evening, after a long but fulfilling day at work, I met a few colleagues for dinner. It caught me off guard. I had forgotten what that felt like: unfiltered joy. No wait, no pretending, no calculating who might be watching. Just laughter, mine. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living. I heard through the grapevine that Rachel had landed a position at another tech firm, somewhere far from here. A younger, smaller company, less glamorous, less visible. I didn't feel satisfied or vengeful. I didn't feel anything, really. Because I had finally learned that moving on doesn't mean watching someone fall. It means no longer needing to. Her name no longer lived rent-free in my mind. Her choices were no longer my burden to carry. And that peace? That was mine alone. A new executive was hired at our company. Tall, confident, charming. Very much like Michael in the early years. He introduced himself in a meeting and made a joke that once would have rattled me, something passive-aggressive, wrapped in humor, aimed just enough to provoke doubt. But this time I didn't flinch. I didn't smile to ease his discomfort. I didn't shrink to avoid making him feel threatened. I met his eyes and simply said, "That won't work here." He laughed nervously, and I moved on with the meeting. In that one sentence, I reclaimed every time I'd stayed silent when I should have spoken. I now live in a home that I chose, decorated with soft light and hard-earned peace. No more walking on eggshells, no more wondering if I'm enough. No more erasing myself to make others comfortable. The woman I was then scared, careful, always second-guessing, she didn't vanish. She evolved. She learned how to hold her ground without apology. She learned how to lose everything she thought mattered and still find herself whole. And every morning now, as I sip my coffee near the window, I whisper one quiet truth to myself. I didn't just survive them. I outgrew them. And that, I've come to learn, is the most powerful revenge of all. If you liked this video, please like, comment, and subscribe.